Shirone was panting heavily, unable to believe he had escaped that deadly trap. What just happened? Did I really get out? His memories were hazy, unable to recall anything. The engine system of that impassable bridge had been completely disabled, reduced to nothing. After witnessing all that, the boy with spiky hair exclaimed in surprise. This was just a beginner's level, yet he had surpassed even the expert challenge of the advanced class. Shirone was exhausted, gasping for breath after the grueling trial. He shouted excitedly, thinking he was surely dead. Everyone who heard this was amazed. Cerielle was so happy she cried, "He did it! He really did it!" Amy smiled softly, thinking to herself, "So cool those who win with all their might never become arrogant or boastful." Everyone gathered around Shirone, enthusiastically congratulating him for overcoming the difficult challenge. "Congratulations, you're amazing. Now you've been directly admitted to the 5th class. The 6th class will definitely be jealous." The professors teleported over, their eyes full of astonishment as they asked, "Did Shirone really make it through?" Sienna sighed with regret. "I missed this important moment all because of Professor Thad. Thad felt wronged. I'll explain to you later." But Sienna didn't hesitate to scold. "Did you even try?" "Honestly, you didn't help at all." Thad was deeply hurt inside. Sienna continued, "Anyway, since both of you finished, we need to verify." She hesitated before calling out, "Headmaster, please let us know." Alpheus, with a thoughtful expression. Sienna kept calling, "Headmaster." Alpheus pondered and muttered, "Have I worried myself to the point of losing teeth?" Looking toward Shirone, he silently thought, "I am truly glad you have shown everyone the light of the Mage family." Thad glanced at Alpheus, thinking to himself that the title given to the one who laid the foundation for the Fulton family's definition was also the one who received the King's Golden Circle Award. Sienna asked with a worried expression, "What exactly happened back then?" A spark of ambition suddenly ignited within him upon seeing Shirone's outstanding talent. Thad stepped forward, placing his right hand over his heart and bowing respectfully. "Headmaster, please announce your decision. I believe the person who will shape the future of the Academy has appeared." Alpheus laughed. "Indeed, I feel a bit emotional recalling the past after witnessing my talented student." He silently thought, "I envy his pure passion for magic." Reflecting on that scene, he could hardly believe fate. Alpheus held up a pendant, continuing his thoughts. "It's been a long time since my heart has raced like this." Standing before all the students and professors of the Academy, Alpheus declared, "Even if only one is accepted, I still want to commend all the students who bravely participated. It is your courage today that will be the guiding flame, bringing the world closer to a bright future." The person who just passed today's test is Arianne Shirone. The crowd around erupted in cheers, looking at him with a mix of exhaustion and astonishment, their eyes full of confusion. From within the crowd, a figure slowly stepped forward, Mark, walking heavily with wounds from the recent trial. People whispered, "Look, it's Mark." Don't tell me he's going to stand up and object just because he came with Shirone. But the new student was actually the one who saved him, and the event was highly suspicious. Mark gradually became uneasy. How can this be? I witnessed it with my own eyes. She truly is a genius. Shirone stared at Mark with a sharp, commanding gaze. Mark bowed his head in apology. "I have been wrong all along." With sincerity, he continued, "No, I'm sorry. Senior, as a mage, I accept full responsibility." All the upperclassmen students were terrified, collectively bowing their heads in silence. Everyone shouted in unison, "I was wrong." A senior stepped forward saying, "We accept the punishment." Shirone still smiled. "All right, I hope you mean it sincerely." They all responded together, "Yes, yes." Senior. In their hearts, everyone thought, "He's truly terrifying. Good thing we apologized early." Meanwhile, Shirone just wanted to sleep, too exhausted to stay awake. Awesome. Amy urged, "Let's go." Cerielle wondered, "Shouldn't we stay with Shirone for now?" Amy replied briefly, "No time." In her mind, she thought, "He's already proven himself." Suddenly, Shirone turned to look at Amy and shouted, Amy! Amy! They both stopped, and he raised his hand, pointing at her. Shirone said, I kept my promise, right? I'm still tired now, but I'll catch up with you soon. Amy froze and those around cheered. Calling his girlfriend's name like that. So jealous. Shirone, you're so cool. Tears streamed down Amy's face at those sincere words. Shirone remembered nothing of that when he woke up. He had been promoted to the 5th class. Far away, Itella was searching for something in confusion. She was certain synesthesia had chased after Shirone. She worried. I lost him in the Dragon Labyrinth. In a magnificent school inside the room called the Disciplinary Committee, a meeting was underway. Thad held the violation report in his hand, while behind him Maria bowed her head in apology. Maria sincerely admitted her mistake and hoped to be disciplined. But Shirone, Mark, and even the gatekeeper Brad, those affected by the sleep spell, spoke up. They did not want Maria to be punished. Other students, sympathizing with them, also began to admit their faults, including matters related to Shirone's test. From the back, Mark led, and one by one other students stood up to confess, making the atmosphere in the room increasingly tense. Shirone looked at Mark, thinking he was trying to keep his promise to take responsibility. Althea spoke, I think Maria's situation is unfortunate. She did not use that device to harm anyone. With a dignified expression, he continued, and according to the rules, disciplinary measures will be enforced. Shirone raised his hand and spoke directly. I also accept the punishment. I ignored the exam suspension signal and entered the labyrinth. Moreover, I led Mark into such a dangerous place. Alpheus rubbed his eyes, thinking, who would have expected to witness such a scene in this school? Thad muttered, things have gone beyond the headmaster's wishes. The students bowed their heads to accept the punishment, as competition had blinded them and obscured the truth. Pride and jealousy aside, now to become prestigious mages, they had to admit their mistakes. Thad sighed, recalling his first meeting with the headmaster. Who would have thought he would teach this way? He taught me many things. Alpheus struck his judgment gavel, the sound echoing throughout the hall, causing everyone to weep. Mark returned to Maria, bowing his head to apologize to her. Sienna was recording violations for each studenta precedent never before seen since the school's founding. Everyone was punished. On the violation board, it clearly stated, Merlang Maria, 19 years old, 7th class, homeroom teacher, suspended for 2 months. Slidermark, 15 years old, 7th class, homeroom teacher, suspended for 2 months. Other students suspended for 1 month, while Shirone was only punished with writing a self-criticism report. Recalling when Shirone admitted his fault, someone asked, Shirone, why did you enter the labyrinth even after seeing the warning signal? Shirone said, at that moment, I didn't want to lose. The only thing I thought about was solving that labyrinth. I don't remember clearly either. Sienna smiled. You do have a positive side I didn't expect, even though you look so obedient. On the announcement paper, Shirone had been promoted to the 5th class while he was sound asleep from exhaustion. In his dreams, someone seemed to call his name Shirone, Shirone. Then suddenly a shout rang out, the Dragon's Labyrinth. A flash of light streaked by. He felt like a ray of light rushing forward, focusing even more. His eyes widened, recalling the scrutinizing gazes. I will erase myself, erase my very being. Remembering what had happened, his soul was shattered into tiny pieces, scattered across the world, as if that was the very nature of this world. Shirone kept rushing forward. The space around him began to shatter. He continued to surge ahead. The space broke faster, infinitely. Suddenly, he fell into that broken void, plummeting uncontrollably, panicked. Beyond the crack lay an impenetrable darkness. The gentle sound of a piano awakened Shirone from that terrifying nightmare. He wondered, had the piano already played? He put on his uniform and straightened his tie. He thought to himself, why can't I remember anything? And why does everything feel so difficult? He picked up a notebook, right? It was the one Amy had lent him to help recall the rules of magic. Flipping through the pages, he thought, today I have to do the exercise in the practice class. I want to thank her for helping me all the way. Suddenly, he saw something that filled his face with questions. In practice hall number 2, Shirone called out to Amy. Amy turned around, her expression worried, while Cerielle smiled and greeted Shirone. Shirone, how are you? Are you all right? Shirone held a basket full of apples and gave it to them. Thanks to you both. I want to express my gratitude, Amy asked curiously. Thanks for what? Apples. Shirone handed the notebook back to Amy, who replied, I wasn't trying to peek, but it seems like you like apples. She thought to herself, but I prefer cherries. Me? Like apples? What? Amy immediately flipped through the pages. It said, what do I think? The problem is time. What's the use of saying sorry? Sorry, apple. In Korean, they sound the same. She blushed, hurriedly ran off, shouting, whatever. Cerielle called after her. Where are you going? Class is about to start, leaving the two with confused looks. Why is she like that? Cerielle quickly chased after Amy. Later, Amy easily passed the advanced test and was promoted to the graduation class. But it seemed there were still problems even her genius mind couldn't solve. A month later, the 7th class students returned after their suspension. The whole group shouted in unison, Senior, we saved you a seat. Cerielle was surprised by this. He worriedly said, you all don't have to do that. Strangely, every time I attend mixed classes, the 7th graders start saving seats for me. Everyone recalled the scary expression he once made and quickly retreated to their seats. It felt like he had truly become a fearsome senior. Suddenly, a voice called out to him, Is there a seat for me, Junior? Recognizing the voice, he turned around. Of course, Cerielle invited. Cerielle invites you to sit here, she added. Your cute girlfriend isn't here, so you don't seem very lively, huh? He smiled awkwardly. You're the lonely one. Those two are always together. Cerielle replied, That's right. And that's also why I'm preparing to graduate and live a normal life. Shirone was startled. Really? Cerielle continued, I plan to graduate, but after seeing you and Amy, I feel much more inspired. I think I've wasted part of my youth. Besides, it seems Amy wants to become a soldier. Shirone was surprised. A soldier? Are you saying she plans to join the war in Ah? Cerielle sighed. Are you two really dating? Shirone worried, Isn't that dangerous? Although Thormia is peaceful now, if war breaks out. Cerielle answered, If war truly happens, all mages have the duty to participate. That's why we receive so many benefits and support like this, Cerielle said. Besides, Amy's specialty is sniper magic, so she'll only participate covertly. Sounds cool, right? Agent Amy, beautiful and charming. Thinking of that image? Shirone replied. That's right. Why would I worry about someone at the top like her? Her specialty is. He waved goodbye to Cerielle. Starting from the 5th class, students begin to think about their future careers as mages. If you excel in a certain field, it becomes a great advantage. But because of that, not everyone easily shares this with lower scoring students. Suddenly, Nade called Shirone. Hey, Shirone, are you going to keep practicing on your own? If anything's hard, just ask me. A very friendly young man. Nade was a friend he truly valued because he was always willing to talk, even though Shirone wasn't very good at expressing himself. Though his grades were only average, Nade was so versatile he could control lightning, but that versatility wasn't always friendly. Seeing Shirone sigh, Nade said, There you go, sighing again. Shirone thought to himself, Everyone has their own traits. 5th class is very different from 7th. Even though they're the same age, they're much more mature than him. Suddenly, 2 voices called out from behind, Hey, Shirone, listen to us. What do you two think? Shirone was surprised to hear his and Nade's names mentioned together, and Nade responded, What? The slim-haired boy spoke up. I said, I can't agree. Shirone thought, What are they trying to argue about? This is bad. Could they be avoiding me again because I don't understand what they're talking about? What is this? Chemistry, biology, or literature? Professors Attila and Shina, which one do you like more? Shirone panicked, eyes wide and mouth agape. He felt extremely awkward, thinking, Girls? What? Nade took a breath and slowly asked, What were you thinking to ask that? Shirone glanced nervously and thought, right, Nade. Then he frowned and loudly declared, I'm on Professor Siena's team. Hearing that, Shirone silently screamed inside, clutching his head as if struck by lightning. Nade crossed his arms and scolded loudly. Don't you guys know Professor Siena is super wise, huh? Seeing himself being challenged, the person opposite immediately retorted, no, it's Professor Atella who makes us feel protected. Shirone stood beside them, watching the three argue awkwardly, thinking, teenage boys really are something else. Suddenly a voice called out to him, Shirone, what do you think? He was startled, mouth agape, thinking, what do I think? Caught off guard by the question, Shirone hesitated endlessly. Yes, that's right. To have a truly beautiful school life, I need to learn how to get along with everyone. Facing three sharp eyes staring at him, Shirone looked embarrassed. He thought, do I have to choose between the two? But they're both professors I respect. Choosing one feels kind of. Thinking this, he clenched both fists and firmly said, for me. Before he could finish, he suddenly froze as he saw the two who had earlier questioned him, now awkwardly stepping back, shyly greeting, and saying, sorry, we'll come back later. He stood stiff like a statue, silently wondering if it was because he couldn't answer. Nade, standing behind, seemed to notice something and turned away, then raised his hand and loudly said, no, it's because of him. Then he called out loudly, hey, Eruki! His cold gaze fixed on them. Eruki stepped forward, stroking his chin with one hand, the other in his pocket, walking slowly as if unaware, and asked, what are you guys chatting about so happily? Nade sighed softly and replied with a wry smile. Same as always, asking which professor is better or something like that. They were no longer children, so to avoid revealing too much, Nade immediately raised his hand to introduce Shirone. This is Eruki. Called by name, Shirone stood behind Nade, silently amazed at the sudden change in attitude, and shyly said, hello. Nade continued, this is your first time meeting, right? Eruki is the eccentric guy from the 5th class. Hearing that, Eruki extended his hand toward Shirone with a cold gaze and said, a pleasure to meet you, Arianne Shirone. I've heard of you for a long time. Actually, who in this school doesn't know you? Shirone was puzzled as he shook Eruki's hand. He looked at it, thinking about that voice. Suddenly, a vague voice echoed in his mind, a blurry face saying to him, don't hesitate. If you want to do something, just do it. The voice continued ringing in his ears. You came here to become a mage, right? At that moment, he just stood still thinking, who is that? Then he happily grasped Eruki's hand firmly and said loudly, thank you. Thanks to you, I was able to successfully use that redirection form. Eruki was slightly surprised, looking down at his clenched hand without saying anything. Shirone continued, thank you so much for what happened last time. After a moment of silence, Nade looked up and sneered, you're the boring type, aren't you? Shirone hesitated briefly, then said, yeah. Nade quickly interjected, separating the two, and said with a resigned smile to Shirone, don't mind him. He's always like that. Then he turned to Eruki, crossing his arms in front of his chest, and said, hey, what kind of talk is that? Eruki scratched his head, feigning ignorance, then calmly replied, what? That's a compliment. After speaking, he stepped forward, turned his head, glanced at the two raising their hands to eye level, and smirked. Anyway, good luck. The 5th class is full of weirdos, so be careful. Hearing that, Nade asked Eruki, where are you going? What about class? He turned his back and walked straight away, leaving only 3 words behind, don't bother. Shirone was amazed by that and thought, does he really not care about attending magic classes? Seeing Eruki walk away, Nade scratched his head, sighed in frustration, and explained, sorry, he's always like that, but once you get used to him, you'll see he's a good guy. Shirone responded with a puzzled tone. He is a bit strange. Nade continued, yeah, if you want to understand him better, it's exhausting. Honestly, he is also a genius. He hesitated before adding, but the problem is he's a genius in a rather unusual field. Shirone looked surprised and asked, Eruki is a genius? Suddenly, loud chatter erupted everywhere. Hey, look, it's Eruki. Why is he entering the spirit realm again? On the high platform, Eruki was walking in some direction. Below, the crowd jostled to watch him, some teasing. Come on, he's not going to strip and lie there, is he? Shirone was stunned, wondering, strip? Nade patted Shirone's shoulder and shouted in alarm, oh no, what's he planning now? Let's go check it out. On the high platform, swirling winds began circling around Eruki's legs. A ring of seals appeared around him. Energy started to rapidly radiate from the spot where he stood. Beneath Eruki's feet, the seals silently spun in circles. He stood proudly, one hand in his pocket, glancing at the blue energy rising from the ground into the sky. Shirone and the others watched with mouths agape. He thought to himself, what is that? Then he guessed, redirecting spiritual energy? That speed is incredible. The blue energy now formed a gigantic circle above the students' heads. Some looked terrified when a voice rang out, every time I see it, it's so captivating. Another voice added, I doubt anyone in this kingdom can do that. Eruki sneered and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, 8 medium-sized blue circles appeared on the ceiling. Everyone looked up, murmuring, what is that, target forms? The teacher in the 4th class heard the noise, turned her head, gasped, then shouted, Eruki, stop right now. On the ceiling, the blue circles began growing 2 small wings, moving, with one circle inside resembling an eye. Eruki lightly pinched his thumb and forefinger together and said coldly, equilibrium point. A warning sounded. Everyone, dodge. Panic erupted as people scrambled to escape, shouting in unison, hey, that crazy guy. In the chaos, the blue eye on the ceiling was pierced by a sword, glowing more brilliantly, frightening everyone. Suddenly, it exploded with a deafening blast that echoed above them all, and purple smoke engulfed the entire area. Everyone screamed hoarsely. Shirone didn't run away, standing firm despite the purple smoke blowing through his hair. Eruki's laughter echoed as he spoke, glancing at Shirone at eye level. See you later, Shirone. He vanished into the swirling purple and white smoke. Suddenly, the teacher grabbed Eruki's ear, angrily scolding him and pulling him away. You little troublemaker, it hasn't even been long since your last suspension, and you're causing trouble again? Eruki grimaced and said, along with her hand gestures, I didn't destroy the machine, you know that, the teacher shouted. You're suspended for 3 days, remember? Eruki wasn't surprised, as if used to it, replying, that long? Another voice chimed in, Eruki is the most eccentric in the 5th class. Now he looks noble and aloof. He sits cross-legged on the desk, hands behind his head, staring straight ahead. The voice continued, his social skills are extremely low, personality average at best. But the reason Eruki is called a genius is that he specializes deeply in one field. His midterm scores in social subjects are zeros, while in natural sciences, all perfect scores. The voice further explained, Eruki has Savant syndrome, a rare phenomenon where the brain recovers from injury but gains exceptional abilities. He's the king of the sciences. His nervous system's neurons light up, and it said he can accurately calculate what will happen in harsh environments with temperatures below 0 or above 100 degrees. He could even calculate the date 40,000 years from now. If he wanted, he could count the digits of pi for the rest of his life. However, when it came to other fields, the story ended there. Suddenly, the literature professor grew angry, her face flushed as she held up a test paper and shouted, Eruki, are you mocking the authority of your teacher? It's ridiculous that you turned an essay into a math problem. Specifically, question 2 asked, analyze the meaning of the line, the leaves sway as they fall, in the poem by poet Gilberto. But you answered that the velocity of the falling leaf surface experiences air resistance and moves according to the resultant force, vector. You even wrote an equation modeling the leaf surface and solved a series of equations in a literature exam. The literature teacher slammed her hand on the desk in anger and continued yelling, this is a literature exam, not math. Meanwhile, Eruki sat looking at his test paper enlarged on the screen. The professor shouted loudly, "It seems you want to prove you're a genius, but many things cannot be explained by math, such as deep imagery or emotions." Eruki showed indifference, scratching behind his ear with his pinky, his face bored, and said, "But teacher, there's nothing I can't explain with numbers." He glanced at the professor and continued, "If we can't explain the world through reasoning and logic, then how can we live in such a terrifying world?" Then he pointed his index finger at the side of his nose, teasing the professor, making her face look like it was about to explode at any moment. He then crossed his arms, looked away, and continued, "For example, an angry face is a manifestation of chemical reactions inside your body." The professor fell silent, glaring at him angrily. Eruki went on, "Emotional imbalance causes nerve tension and irregular blood pressure. Blood vessels dilate, making your face flush red, and when they constrict, the skin turns blue." Hearing this, the professor grew furious. Her face flushed and twisted like a demon, grinding her teeth as she shouted, "Get lost!" Her voice echoed through the administration building, "Get lost! You fail, fail. Understand?" Shirone was stunned, thinking, amazing how he can speak about what he believes with such confidence. He continued, "I can't believe he's my age." People really come in all kinds. Nade sat opposite, resting his chin on his hand, with an awkward expression, and said, "The professors used to encourage Eruki, but everyone eventually gave up. He'd sit cross-legged, chin propped, then cheerfully speak up. Who would have thought he'd be curious about you? What a surprise. I'm glad you talked to me." Shirone smiled awkwardly. "I understand," he thought, "but I'm still a little worried." Then he seriously put his hand to his mouth, thinking, "Anyway, Nade really is very knowledgeable." While he was lost in thought, a girl standing nearby spoke softly, "Yes, excuse me." Both turned around in surprise to see a long-haired girl with a shy expression step forward and address Shirone. "Shirone, would you like to join our research group?" Nade quietly called his name, and the girl continued, "We're studying matter teleportation magic. If someone skilled in photon magic like you joins, our research will progress much faster." She added, "By submitting the research, you won't waste your vacation time on performance evaluations and can study together." Shirone felt a bit awkward and replied, "Sorry, my current academic results aren't very good." "Nade, I think I need to focus on that first." He continued, "Sorry for declining." The girl gently responded, "We understand. If you change your mind, please let me know." After saying this, she returned to her friends, leaving a final message. "If you change your mind, you can join any time." Shirone sat at a table across the room, turning around with a squinting smile. Hearing this, he replied, "All right, thanks." Nade also turned and smiled with narrowed eyes at them. After a while, they moved elsewhere, and Nade glanced back, grinning happily. "That research group is pretty impressive," Shirone responded. "Well, you already have seen your army, so that group isn't that remarkable." Shirone fell silent for a moment, wondering, what do those two things have to do with each other? Then he shifted his thoughts. "Unfortunately, I still lack a lot of knowledge. Remembering my low midterm scores, raising my grades is already hard. I wouldn't dare dream about joining a research group," Nade teased. "Ah, jealous now, huh?" Shirone dodged and asked, "Nade, don't you have a research group? If it were you, I bet you'd be in a good one already, right?" Nade cheerfully replied, "Me? I do have a research group," Shirone exclaimed in surprise. Then Nade continued, "And I'm the group leader." Hearing this, Shirone's friendly expression flickered with a hint of disappointment. He sighed and lowered his head, sitting quietly. Seeing this, Nade awkwardly waved his hand to comfort him. "No, it's not a big group. You're making me embarrassed. My group only has 2 members. The funding was also cut," Nade explained loudly. "All the seniors have graduated, so that's why I got the position." Shirone nodded, thinking the graduating class graduates also joined that group. Then his eyes lit up as he realized something. If it's a research group that had graduates participate, then it must be extremely promising. Thinking that, Shirone asked, "If you don't mind, Can I visit your research room? In a strange forest outside, a voice sounded, Shirone, I thought you weren't interested in research. Shirone replied, No, I am interested, but I thought I might bother others if I joined. Nate exclaimed in surprise, What? The research group isn't rigid at all. We study and have fun together. This is our research room. Nate led Shirone to the research room, a place as dark as ink with strange shapes. Shirone wondered, What is this? Nate explained, That's the Matut Istis storage room, where all the training facilities for students are kept. The two suddenly felt as small as ants standing before a large black cube, partly missing, lying in a clearing within the forest. Nade continued, This is an extremely advanced storage room. You can place your study materials inside this cube, and it will automatically deliver them to the room you need. Shirone sighed, despairing. Oh, so this is a storage room? Seeing his expression, Nade hurried to explain, Wait, although it looks like that, there's much more inside that will surprise you. The two entered the lab. Nade led the way, introducing, This is a precious place that my seniors have worked hard to protect. Shirone asked, Really? Then he continued, So I can look forward to it? Nade rolled his eyes. Of course. Then he added, You'll be very surprised by what's inside. Suddenly, an image appeared of a hand holding chalk, quickly writing on a blackboard from which faint noises emerged. As they walked and talked, Nade slung his bag over his shoulder, smiling as he said to Shirone, Other groups are eyeing this place. My seniors had to fight hard to keep ownership of it. Shirone turned down another path and stopped to ask, Where is this? Nade turned back with a bright smile and said, Honestly, we can use anything inside here if we want. Shirone wondered, Isn't that against the rules? Nade replied, Every time you find the item you need, the structure of this place changes. Then he stepped deeper inside, while Shirone followed just along a long yellow line marked with the symbol 7H. Nade walked with one hand carrying his bag on his shoulder, the other in his pocket, smirking confidently. No one can find us here. Shirone followed behind, surprised, thinking, a hideout no one can find. Nade turned back cheerfully and said, This is our research room. Shirone stood silent, speechless, mouth agape in astonishment. He let out a doubtful sound as they stood before an old sign hanging on the door, reading, Scientific Research Room of Supernatural Phenomena. Shirone suddenly exclaimed in surprise, Science of supernatural phenomena? Then he froze, pondering the idea of supernatural phenomena at a magic academy. Nade, still as enthusiastic as ever, asked him, What do you think? Pretty cool, right? He continued excitedly, Demons, spirits, reincarnation, aliens, hell, gods, and so on. We study everything related to those things. Behind him, Shirone's face turned pale, his body trembling uncontrollably. He doubted himself. I must have picked the wrong group. I'm not completely uninterested, but this is kind of unsettling. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening echoed in the silent space. Then came a loud bang, not harmful, but causing his hair and clothes to flutter wildly. Shirone was startled, exclaiming, What's that? Nade laughed with delight, eyes narrowing, saying, Just a bit of dust. You'll get used to it quickly. Shirone coughed violently, covering his mouth with his hand, silently thinking, Why should I get used to this? Why not just clean it up? Once again, he froze as he saw a figure in front of him writing on the board. It was Eruki, focused on explaining something. Shirone spoke up, Is that Eruki? Nade tilted his head and casually said, Our research group is pretty notorious. We can't reveal all members yet, so I hadn't told you before. Shirone wondered, Is Eruki interested in supernatural phenomena? Nade explained, No, quite the opposite. He joined to prove the contrary. It's also a good way to make people think about the world through reason. Suddenly, Eruki noticed them, his eyes lighting up as he excitedly exclaimed, Huh? Is that Shirone? He ran over, grabbing Shirone's hand, enthusiastically saying, What wind blew a genius like you to such a lowly place? It's good you're here. Listen to what I've found. Shirone answered with surprise and a hum. Eruki continued, When matter decomposes, what's left are atoms, right? Correct? Still excited, he added. But I think even atoms can break down into smaller particles. What do you think those atomic particles are made of? Shirone hesitated at the question and replied, yeah, right. I'm not sure, but I think there's some hidden latent energy. Eruki kept shaking Shirone's hand up and down, saying, exactly. I know you're amazing. I can't believe you think that far ahead. Shirone broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, did I really say that right? Eruki looked at Shirone happily and continued, that's right. There's a vast amount of latent energy, so much it could destroy an entire city, he asked. What do you think would happen? Shirone was stunned by the question and replied in surprise, what? Then, with a serious expression, he said, people would get hurt. Eruki twirled his pinky near his nose and coldly asked, what are you talking about? Shirone frowned like a madman, bluntly responding, there's so much hidden energy inside. Do you think we should worry about that? Shirone was amazed. Do you even understand what you're saying? He raised his voice. The headmaster told us that as mages, we must consider the consequences our magic could cause on Earth. Nade stood behind, watching the two tense up, unsure how to intervene. Shirone spoke louder. So do you think sacrificing the majority is acceptable just to satisfy your desires? Eruki picked up a cherry stem from his cup and coldly remarked, you're so boring, Shirone replied. Eruki held the cherry up to eye level, smirked, and said, you think other mages know this but do nothing? It's because they don't have the ability to do so. That's why they don't. Eruki popped the cherry into his mouth as he said, your supreme intelligence is a gift from heaven to accomplish something. Shirone frowned, looked at him and shouted, no matter how much of a genius we are, that doesn't matter. Better to be a harmless fool than a genius who harms others. Eruki tilted his head back, chewing the cherry, then glanced down with a teasing tone. A minority of geniuses lead the majority of fools. History has proven that, and so does the world we live in. I hate having to use idealism. Shirone narrowed his eyes at him, speaking almost in a whisper. No, your logic is just the smell of defeat. You can easily satisfy that ideal. Sweat poured down Nade like a shower between the two, and he quickly raised his hands to break the tense atmosphere, saying, wow, that discussion was great. Really interesting. Shirone stared at Eruki, who crossed his arms, looked away, then rubbed the tip of his nose. Nade whispered, but you know arguing emotionally like this isn't good, right? Come on, sit down, have some cake and a drink. Shirone felt he couldn't stay any longer, turned quickly toward the door and said, I have nothing more to say. Bye, Nade, I'm leaving, Nade shouted, raising his hand to call Shirone as he walked away. Wait, Shirone, do you know the way out? Eruki casually rubbed his nose and said, just follow the path you came in. If you can't do that, then you're a real idiot. Nade angrily turned and shouted, hey, why would you say that? If it were you, you'd explain the way so he understands, right? Eruki plopped down on the couch and replied, well, I admit I was a bit harsh. He crossed his arms, rested his right leg on his thigh, smirked, and said, because he's my rival. Nade looked at him confused and asked, you did that on purpose, didn't you? Moreover, who would have thought he'd use the word rival when all he cares about in this world are numbers? Eruki brushed his hair back, tilted his head arrogantly at Nade, and said, precisely because I only care about numbers, you've seen Shirone's rank-up test, right? Nade replied in surprise, the A-level teleportation test, of course, and that's why he's rated on par with us. He glanced at the ceiling, pondering, then said to the newcomers learning teleportation, do you know how fast you need to be to surpass level 10, especially the Dragon Labyrinth? Nade fell silent, his face tense as he looked at Eruki, then continued thoughtfully, passing without breaking down the time is impossible. At that moment, the speed he performed divisions reached 10,000 calculations per second. Eruki said this in a low voice. The image of Shirone's brain working rapidly, connecting with the spiritual fields, appeared in Eruki's mind. Nade was amazed upon hearing this, exclaiming loudly, 10,000 calculations per second? Suddenly, Eruki dropped his head and laughed like a madman. shouting, "That is the secret of brilliance." Faster than effort and more precise than knowledge, no calculation can surpass the speed of unconscious awareness. Then he suddenly became calm, looking at Nade with cold, steel-like eyes, and asked, "What about you, Nade?" Nade furrowed his brow slightly, then smiled and replied, "I see. A battle between calculation and brilliance, right? And you want to confirm that through the exam, don't you?" As he spoke, Nade thought of Shirone's determined look when he left earlier. The next day, many whispers echoed through the spacious student building. "The marksmanship test will take place in 2 weeks, right? If I fail again, I won't be able to advance." Inside the classroom where the whispers came from, apparently after class, Shirone was packing his bag on the desk and overheard those words. Didn't he look forward to it? Suddenly, they mention him, causing Shirone to pause and listen attentively. A voice rang out, "He's very good at the practical part, isn't he? I wonder how high his score will be." He heard the chatter and couldn't help but worry, thinking, the marksmanship test. In the marksmanship test, you use active magic to aim and shoot at targets and receive corresponding points. Active magic refers to spells that produce direct effects on targets outside the caster. Not only offensive, healing, or support mages can participate in this test. Everyone is eligible. In the exam, you must eliminate all targets appearing in each stage to proceed to the next. There are 3 stages in order, 1, 2, and 3, with targets numbering 1, 1, 1, and 2 respectively. Quick and accurate aiming is extremely important. However, Shirone sat upright in his chair, holding a cup of tea with both hands, speaking with a mix of surprise and worry. "Professor, I still can't control active magic. How can I take the marksmanship test?" The professor replied, "To use the omniscient level magic, you need to score at least 60 points on this grade sheet." A grade sheet appeared with 4 numbers, 4, 1, 4, 0, 4, 1, 4, 2. Oliver Sheena, the homeroom teacher of the 5th class and Shirone's professor, sat on a chair, holding a teacup, smiling with squinted eyes as she said to him, "But your chemistry grades have been rising rapidly lately. Very deserved." He called her in a pleading tone. Outside the window, you could see her office where 2 people were sitting across from each other. Sheena wholeheartedly encouraged him. "I'm not teasing you. You fully understand this subject. You can optimize and make full use of your knowledge." Shirone slightly bowed, feeling embarrassed as she continued. "And there's one more thing, right? Some knowledge only experts truly grasp." He was surprised, silently guessing, wait, is it photon decomposition theory? He thought to himself that teleportation magic is a variation of photon decomposition theory, a form of passive magic that can break down the user's body into photon particles. He recalled before that the time was too short to sense it as passive magic. So it's not too advanced for me, huh? Passive magic is a type without a time limit for mages. After the reflection, Shirone looked at Sienna in amazement and said, "I didn't know we could apply photon decomposition theory to active magic." She turned to rummage through something as she said, "Recently, such magic has been registered at the association." He wondered silently, magic using photons, hopefully it's really cool. He remembered the radiant image of Army using her spiritual field. She handed him a document and said, "Take a look." Shirone held the document in his hands, thinking, this is his first act of magic. He flipped through the pages of the magic journal until he reached a page with important information, new discoveries about photon decomposition theory, photon output. Below the picture were more details. The researcher described photon output as the name suggests. This is magic whose output is light. A person can detect everything around by photon output. However, this method is not as effective as light magic, and more research is needed. He called out with curiosity, "Professor." Holding the book eyes wide, Shirone said, "Are you sure this is the magic you intended to introduce? I can take the exam, but I'm not sure I can use this magic." She lifted her teacup, closed her eyes gently, and spoke kindly. At first glance, it may seem quite useless, but the idea of using photon output is incredibly creative. As she sipped her tea, she continued, light is the fastest thing in this world. A golden Z-shaped flash appeared in her mind, along with linear paths that are easy to control. At the Ivory Tower, the leading center for optimizing magic efficiency, it is predicted that photon output will be a major breakthrough in future information transmission and communication. A towering skyscraper appeared faintly beyond a layer of white clouds. Sheena said, it has been and is being researched in many magical techniques we have yet to discover. If they study it thoroughly and consistently, this will become a great branch of magic with tremendous potential by the time you graduate. After she finished speaking, Shirone rested his chin on his hand, thoughtfully gazing at the book before replying, I understand. It won't be bad if I master this skill before everything happens. I will follow your advice, Professor. He thought to himself that magic leading to a new field might be quite interesting to study. Now, Shirone was in a different space deep in the forest. He reached out into the air but felt nothing, exclaiming in surprise. Then he muttered, raising both hands, waving them around, why isn't it working? Holding the document Shayna gave him in one hand and staring intently at his open palm, he suddenly said, are you kidding? I can't control it at my current level? Then he realized he was standing in the training corner with other students. At Practice Area 32, a vast open space nestled at the foot of a mountain, surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills. Near the edge stood a large grandstand, crowded with fifth-level practical class students. Someone raised their hands into the air, thinking, casting magic, the act of performing spells, he continued pondering. Although magic doesn't emit from the hands but from the spiritual field, imagining photons shooting from the hands makes casting spells easier. Worried, he lifted both hands to look closely. Creating photons isn't simple. Is it because my spiritual field is of the convergent type, like casting magic? Suddenly the voice of a female professor rang out. Nice to meet you all. That's Etella, she said as she stepped down from the grandstand, smiling with squinted eyes. Let's begin the lesson right away. The students on the field were stunned, mouths agape, asking in unison, who are you? Her outfit changed. Her glasses disappeared. She had taken them off, and she gently clapped her hands, smiling kindly at everyone. Shirone exclaimed in surprise, wow, her outfit is so beautiful. A male student behind touched his forehead with his index finger, eyes closed, guessing. She probably just returned from training. He turned and asked, training? When? Where? The other male student replied, that's right. Professor Etella is the bishop of the Karsus congregation. Shirone looked at him skeptically. Bishop? You mean Etella is a pastor? Another male student behind chimed in. Yes, a bishop is a high-ranking protector of the 12 holy temples. He said there are 12 bishops across the entire continent. Etella shone brightly in her bishop's attire, surrounded by an aura that not everyone possessed. The male student's voice rang out, and Etella is one of them with unwavering spiritual strength. She was awarded the title Jonas by the kingdom, the title given to the mage with the strongest mind. After saying this, he proudly turned his face toward the arena and said, got it? Despite her appearance, Professor Etella is instantly the words mesmerizing appeared above Nade's head. He looked at Etella with admiration, clasped his hands together, and exclaimed, from today, I'm joining Professor Etella's team. He covered his face, twisting his body as he spoke with rosy eyes. I will study hard, study forever, test forever. The two male students were speechless watching Nade, while Shirone remained silent, turning away, lost in thought. Amazing. He never expected to learn magic from such a talented professor. Etella happily stood on the arena, clasped her hands, and loudly asked, are you all ready for the marksmanship test? The crowd below shouted in unison. Then she said, before the test, each class will have a practical lesson like today. Everyone enthusiastically responded in unison, yes. Atella stood solemnly, smiling as she began the lesson. Today, I will teach you advanced techniques to enhance versatility. I have invited a senior from the graduating class to assist. A lively murmur spread. Really a graduate? Where? Where? Atella's warm voice echoed, Welcome, Mage Kotodama, Sanyun. Note, Koto means word. Dama means spirit or soul. Sanyun relaxed his shoulders, stepped forward, and greeted the fifth class. He placed his hand on his right shoulder, bowed to everyone, and said, At the respectful invitation of Professor Atella, I have come. Although busy, I hope to help you all willingly. The female students cheered excitedly, while Sanyun bowed beside them. Atella clasped her hands before her chest and reminded, Sanyun's signature magic is Kotodama, closely related to today's lesson. Pay attention and focus. Two male students standing before Shirone and Nade looked envious. The one on the left exclaimed, Just sniffing out the graduate spot. The person on the right clenched his fist and grit his teeth loudly. He's not even on our level. Nade and Shirone stood behind, their eyes full of disdain. Nade spoke up. Since when did he become your equal? Sanyun stood on the podium, looking down at the crowd gathered below, and said loudly, Kotodama magic uses the power of words to amplify magical energy. To make it easier for you to understand, I will show rather than just explain. He raised both hands forward, his blue eyes looking upward, and said, Nade, first I'll show you the basic dragon scroll wind magic. The spiritual field from his palms formed a swirling blue aura like a ball. Shirone thought in surprise, Wow, this magic is exactly what the headmaster showed me when I was little. Sanyun exclaimed, Dragon scroll wind. Immediately, a towering whirlwind suddenly appeared, whipping everyone's hair, with its center exactly where he stood. After the whirlwind calmed, people whispered in fear. That was terrifying, no joke. Sanyun calmly closed his eyes, holding a small notebook, and continued, Remember the power of the chant just now. Now I will enhance the magic with Kotodama. He opened his mouth to recite the chant, Earth, Mother of the. Then he opened his blue eyes, looked at the small notebook, and read aloud, I beseech the strength of the one who holds my hand. From above, the sacred temple stretched endlessly, filling his heart with emotion as the mage's soul merged with the earth and sky, resonating a brilliant hymn of praise. He chanted, Let the ember blaze, gather winds into a storm. His voice echoed, stunning everyone. A female student looked at him admiringly, murmuring, Sounds like a real spell. His voice is amazing. 3 minutes passed as he diligently recited, Soul unites with body. We call upon the name. Mages fear not the wild power of the mighty lion. Along with the ocean carrying the fervent sunlight and the earth harboring winds blowing for hundreds of millions of years. We vow boundless dedication and absolute reverence. Some began to grow sleepy. A few tiredly asked, When will you finish? Don't fall asleep. He kept a serious expression, narrowing his eyes, saying, Dragon scroll wind. Immediately, a whirlwind spiraled from his feet straight up into the sky with such force it threatened to throw everyone, including Shirone. The crowd panicked, shouting, Help me! Tossed back and forth by the storm's pull, they were like strands of hair in the wind, yelling, I thought I was done for. Atella smiled gently, eyes squinting, saying, I don't recite the chant aloud, but still chant it in my mind. Sanyun's voice rang out. Of course, I don't just read it. I put my will into every word and cherish them. Inside that small book were many different chants. Sanyun continued, That's what helps amplify magical power. It's the fundamental principle of Kotodama magic. He held the small notebook, closed his eyes calmly, and said, However, the chant is too long to use in combat. Now I'll show you something called the magic sonic speed. Everyone gasped, Again? But Sanyun didn't read anymore. He folded the notebook with his thumb and forefinger and softly said, Earth, mother of the... Then he tilted his head back, opened his mouth wide, and shouted, Grant me. What followed were chants so fast and lengthy that others couldn't catch the words clearly. People were terrified as the wind grew stronger. their hair almost flying off their heads. San Yun chanted continuously, his tongue moving rapidly, making his words hard to understand. Holding the notebook in one hand, the other raised to the sky, he shouted the chant loudly, his hair flying wildly in the fierce wind. His blue eyes revealed fiery red veins as he yelled, "Dragon Scroll Wind!" Immediately after, the wind blew from the ground upward, forming a massive pillar of wind visible from miles away. Around the pillar of wind, powerful swirling air currents formed a raging tornado, blowing away the dense forest canopy across the vast woodland. Suddenly, Atella's voice rang out. "All right, everyone has seen the senior demonstrate, right?" No one answered, as they were still scattered across the ground after the Dragon Scroll Wind technique. Shirone punched the ground with one hand, struggling to stand, brushing hair from his face with the other, eyes half closed, thinking, "That power is unbelievable, truly the level of a graduate class." He pondered further. A graduate mage is unofficially called a level 10 mage. Itella stood with her hands clasped, turning to smile warmly at San Yun, saying, "Thank you, San Yun." He bowed and replied, "Call on me any time." Shirone watched them, thinking to himself, he couldn't imagine an official level 6 mage like Itella possessing such powerful authority. Some students had already gotten up, while others still lay scattered on the ground. A trembling student from afar raised their hand to ask, "Professor, do we have to practice Kodadama magic?" She stood on the podium, looked down, and replied, "Kodadama magic is an advanced subject, so you won't have to practice it," she said, bringing a sigh of relief from everyone. Then, in a serious tone, she continued, "Instead, the technique you'll practice is called tracing characters. Tracing characters helps enhance versatility by concentrating spiritual energy while counting numbers." Shirone seriously raised his hand and asked, "So the more we count, the stronger we become?" The other students gasped. A male student asked, "Why numbers, Professor?" Itella explained, "Numbers are symbols with rules, so they're compatible with our spiritual fields." As soon as she finished speaking, her eyes turned blue, and behind her appeared a blue glass panel displaying the words "Spiritual Field Radius 10 meters. She continued, "Of course, you're not just counting randomly. Like Kodadama magic, you assign specific meanings to them. Let me demonstrate. Rules are the most basic system of propositions in logic and mathematics." At that moment, the space around Itella was enveloped by a spiritual field with a 10-meter radius. She stood in the center of the spiritual field, smiling with squinted eyes, and said, "I will activate the spiritual field using the tracing characters technique by counting a sequence of tens." Then she closed her eyes and began counting. 100. The 10-meter radius spiritual field suddenly expanded beyond its previous size. The students below buzzed with excitement. "Professor, did she just count to 100? Did she really count from 1 to 100? Another surprised voice called out, "Her spiritual field has expanded from 10 meters to 12 meters. Itella continued counting. 400, 1,100. The field kept expanding with each number she spoke, counting up to 1,700, then 2,400. Shirone was amazed, quickly covering his face, thinking, "No way. How can a normal person be this fast?" The field kept growing, and he continued to be stunned. "That's so easy." When she reached 10,000, she opened her eyes and sighed with relief. The spiritual field now covered nearly half of the training ground, and everyone exclaimed in admiration. Just by using the tracing characters technique, the field had quadrupled in size. Itella stood on the podium, looking down at the amazed students, and said, "Did you notice? If Kodadama magic reflects and constructs scenes, then tracing characters uses thought to reflect." She added, "The faster your mind moves, the stronger the spiritual field becomes. Not only does its size expand, but its power also increases, improving both accuracy and precision." Numbers spiraled down from above as she continued. "All of your skills will be enhanced." Shirone thought in amazement, "Awesome. If I learn this technique, I'll be able to create photons. Itella's voice echoed. Of course, tracing characters isn't omnipotent. Effect diminishes if your mental strength isn't firm enough. She cheerfully reminded them, so don't forget, strict discipline combined with empathetic willpower is the basic principle when activating the spiritual field, understand? Everyone replied in unison, yes. After a while, everyone dispersed to practice, while Shirone stood still in one spot. Clenching his fists, he nodded happily to himself. All right, I counted up to 1,000 in 1 minute. Then he thought, but quietly counting numbers is harder than I expected. Indeed, it's difficult for anyone to maintain focus when counting for a long time. Seeing this, he pondered, if I don't continually train my mental strength during lessons, I probably won't manage. Suddenly, Shirone remembered something. Wait, when teleporting instantly, I used a technique that helps sense complex calculations. He guessed that might be tracing characters as numbers of various sizes appeared in his mind. He continued sorting them by hundreds and counted them all at once. A beam of light touched the ground, shining brilliantly. Shirone estimated it lasted about 10 seconds. Then he grew serious, held out his palm silently wondering, should I aim at that tree? He muttered in his mind, photon emission, and his palm suddenly glowed. The golden light spiraled into rings, flying straight toward the distant tree, astonishing everyone. Huh? What's that? What is that light? The classmates behind him stared wide-eyed and open-mouthed. Shirone was startled too, holding his position, silently exclaiming in his mind, so dazzling. After casting that spell, Shirone stood still, deep in thought it was too flashy. Looking down from above at the spacious training ground, he remained motionless while everyone gathered in small groups, turning to watch him. Whispered conversations arose. Isn't that photon emission? Huh? Is he learning it for the marksmanship test? Since it's light, the speed really is fast, one student hesitantly said. But learning that just for a test seems a bit. Immediately another voice responded, yeah, but it doesn't cause damage. Outside, Atella happened to turn and saw him casting photon emission. Her face showed slight surprise as she thought, huh? Shirone, who used to specialize in defense, has now learned active magic? She approached and called out loudly, Shirone, it seems you've succeeded with tracing characters, right? He looked back at her in surprise, then shyly turned away and said, yes, perhaps. Atella cheerfully suggested, so, would you like to try practicing inside the spiritual field? Now all eyes were fixed on the spiritual field, where a figure stood firm at the center. Whispers spread everywhere. Oh, immediate marksmanship practice? I'm so curious. Atella stood behind the desk, sternly instructing, after completing tracing characters, summon the targets. Shirone turned and replied, yes. He closed his eyes, focusing intensely. First, he used tracing characters to enhance his spiritual field. Numbers of varying sizes gradually converged into a brilliant point of light, then split into many smaller beams surrounding his body. Shirone stood upright, snapped his fingers, and the spiritual field activated powerfully around him. In his mind, he thought of summoning the targets. Instantly, numerous blue silhouettes appeared around Shirone. On the dark green board appeared information. Marksmanship, level 1, 0 points, time limit 1 minute. Shirone's pupils reflected the numerous targets, the shimmering blue light dazzling all eyes. He furrowed his brow, eyes wide as he examined each target before him. Then he raised his hand, focusing his spiritual field on a single point, his palm aimed at the target hovering in midair. He murmured internally, photon emission. Instantly, a photon shot forth, blazing straight toward the target. Shirone thought in awe, so this is how it works. He felt that, thanks to the bullet's near-light speed, the photon emission needed just one cast to automatically seek and shatter the target into pieces. He continued thinking, feels like I'm aiming and firing at the same time. Currently, his marksmanship was at level 2, with a score of 11 and 55 seconds remaining. The other students gasped in surprise. exclaiming, "That's really fast!" Everyone was stunned, mouths wide open in amazement as someone's voice repeatedly exclaimed, the moment he finished aiming, he hit the target instantly. It's like an instant activation magic. Itella stood silently watching him, thinking to herself, I see. Shirone's tracing characters are a set of numbers combined into a large structure and then deployed. This is the modular technique once applied in intelligence magic. Above Shirone, his spell attacked the targets like fireworks bursting brilliantly in the sky, while beneath his feet, a wide circle of seals covered the entire training ground. Itella observed, marveling silently. What an astonishing growth in speed. Meanwhile, Shirone focused all his energy, preparing to launch the next attack on the targets. He cast every spell without missing, each target shattered to pieces. After a while, the training session with the spiritual field finally ended. Shirone stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve, paying no attention to the information on the wall. Time's up, level 19, score 342, time limit 0 minutes and seconds. Everyone on the ground kept discussing, isn't that a perfect score, destroying 342 targets in 1 minute. A voice rang out, should I switch to using photon emission now? Another replied, better note it's only possible if you have deep knowledge like Shirone. Shirone wiped his sweat, sighed, and thought, with this move, I don't have to worry about the marksmanship test anymore. Nade stood outside, arms crossed, saying, so far he hasn't fully mastered the magic, but the moment he understands it, he immediately scored 342 points. Truly impressive. Eruki, sitting nearby, remarked, that's quite a score you threw out there. Then quickly corrected himself, what, but it's his first time, so that's not bad. Eruki stood up, grinning broadly, and said, his score was wild, but interesting too. Suddenly, Eruki raised his hand and called for Ethan. Professor, I want to try too. Both she and Nade were startled by this. She frowned worriedly. Eruki, are you all right? But don't cause any trouble, okay? Shirone was standing, wiping his face, when he suddenly heard a clear voice. Huh? It's Eruki? He wants to practice too? Hearing this, Shirone turned away, thinking quietly to himself. Eruki, I don't like his way of thinking. Yet I hesitate, curious inside. Eruki stepped out from the grandstand, bold and confident, drawing everyone's attention. He took his hands out of his pockets, stood upright, smirked, and the spiritual field began to surround him. The spiritual energy shot up from his feet into the sky, a look of pride clear on his face. People murmured in confusion, redirect type marksmanship? No way, marksmanship is completely different. Shirone was equally surprised. A voice rang out, so he plans to defeat the targets by staring at them without using Sinistrosia? The targets floated one by one around Eruki, beneath him a large circle of seals. He bowed his head and snapped his fingers. Spiritual energy flew straight to the targets. Shirone furrowed his brow, thinking, the target size is even shrinking. How is he doing that? Then he widened his eyes and softly said, this is. Eruki's spiritual field twisted in a Z shape, piercing through the center of each target in the sky, astonishing everyone below. Suddenly, all the targets exploded simultaneously like brilliant fireworks, leaving everyone wide-eyed in shock. On the board appeared the information, speed goal, level 2, score 13, time remaining 57 seconds. Eruki's spiritual field continued to snake through the target centers, causing them to burst above everyone's heads. Shirone stood frozen in amazement, watching the scene, thinking, no need to watch further, I already know he'll easily surpass my score. He furrowed his brow, reasoning. Eruki stood high above, glanced down, smirking silently, thinking, if you're already amazed at this, Shirone, that's not good. Then he pointed forward, accelerating the spiritual field through the targets faster, creating diverse patterns that caused continuous explosions. Everyone gasped in awe. Amazing, the speed has increased? Has Eruki always been this strong? A fellow student exclaimed in surprise. Shirone stood behind, eyes raised, covering his mouth with a horrified expression, then reasoned, I get it, no, if you watch closely. You'll see he's not tracking the targets with his naked eyes. He predicted the target's movement paths using motion equations. Shirone observed how Eruki controlled his spiritual field and thought that the targets had been divided into different equations. He continued pondering, amazed that after predicting the movements, Eruki could still catch all the targets using the redirect form. Shirone placed his hand on his chin and asked, how is his spiritual field so fast? Is it also thanks to tracing characters? Nade stepped closer, smiling softly. Yes, but Eruki doesn't just deploy hundreds or thousands of numbers, Shirone asked in surprise. So he's calculating in the millions? Nade looked at him, smirked, and replied curtly, millions? Hearing this, Shirone's face showed disbelief. On the wall board appeared the results. Time's up. Level 24. Score 548. Time limit 0 minutes. Everyone cheered. What? Eruki is incredible. He smiled smugly, one hand on his hip, the other raised above his head, looking quite odd. The crowd continued cheering. Why keep your skills hidden? Hitting targets with such tiny redirections is really tough for you, even human. Atella stood aside, watching him walk past with a hint of surprise, thinking, impressive, very skillful. He approached the edge of the grandstand, stood before Shirone, who was glaring, and asked, how was that? Worth watching, right? Shirone looked up and replied, that was amazing. I didn't expect you to use redirection like that. Eruki put his hands in his pockets, smirked arrogantly, and said, is that all? I'm a bit disappointed. Shirone was surprised. What? Eruki said, I'm really impressed you thought of modularization. Shirone frowned. Eruki asked seriously, are you curious how I calculate millions of numbers? Shirone, tense, looked him straight in the eye. Yes, but can you tell me? It seems you already see me as a rival. Everyone watched the two of them intently. Eruki stood on the podium, arrogantly saying, it doesn't matter. Just because you know doesn't mean you can do it. Shirone remained silent, making everyone curious. What's going on? Eruki's voice rang out. It's nothing big. He scratched his head, glanced elsewhere, and continued, I used cuts and reductions on the units. Shirone was shocked, mouth agape, thinking, no way. How can he consider that a method? Those nearby widened their eyes and exclaimed, what? That's outrageous. Shirone frowned, pondering. If he calculated everything fully, the numbers would be far larger. Even using tracing characters, the simplest method, the calculations are still complex. He asserted firmly, this is the genius syndrome. Eruki pointed his index finger across his nose, frowning, and asked, what do you think? Can you beat me? Shirone raised his voice. I have no intention of beating anyone. This is just a test. Eruki covered his nose, looked away, and replied, typical weakling talk. Remember this. Eruki then spoke seriously. If you don't have the skill, give up your ideals and keep pretending you're the best. He looked at Shirone with disdain. That's not convincing at all. Shirone angrily growled. If I defeat you, won't that prove I'm right? Eruki snapped his fingers and smiled mysteriously. Of course, but no matter how knowledgeable you are, compared to me, you're still just an insect. Shirone was furious, shouting, an insect? An insect? Everyone was surprised, including Nade, who thought silently, this is. Then he happily took out a sheet of paper. Interesting. He read the rules of the marksmanship test. The score is based on the number of targets hit within the allotted time. Level 1, 0 points. 1 minute. At each level, the number of targets increases. Level 1 has 10 targets. Level 2, 11. Level 3, 12. Level 4, 13. Level 5, 14. Missing even one target means you cannot advance to the next stage. Additionally, at higher levels, the targets appear faster. If the spiritual field cannot keep up with the targets, the student will time out. Without quick reaction, you cannot summon more targets, and your score will be severely affected. Everyone focused on the marksmanship test results board, and Shirone watched quietly, thinking that the average score for 5th grade was 400, with no one yet surpassing 700 points. He rested his chin on his hand, reasoning that to reach 700 points, he couldn't miss a single target within 1 minute, which meant reaching level 30. To achieve that, he had to advance 1 level every 5 seconds. Shirone stood in the center of the platform, all eyes on him. He frowned, looked up, and raised his right hand high. Instantly, the targets exploded one after another. The students tilted their heads back to watch. One boy admired, "Amazing, so amazing." Shirone turned and launched an attack, his eyes sharp with determination. He swung his hand, directing the spiritual field toward the targets, which burst with thunderous explosions against the ceiling. 2 people who had spoken with Shirone looked on in surprise. The first said seriously, "Shirone isn't joking now. He can hit targets without teleporting his head." The other doubted, "How can he do that?" The blackboard on the wall displayed, "Time's up, level 25, score 567, time limit 0 minutes. A voice echoed in awe, "Within a week, his score has increased by 200 points. The spiritual field vanished, and Shirone massaged his left wrist, breathing a sigh of relief as if shedding all his fatigue amidst the cheers echoing everywhere. He turned and walked away. From afar, 2 people whispered, "His bullet speed is really fast. Once he aims, he never misses," the other replied. "Continuous firing has improved a lot. Sometimes he can shoot 4 bullets per second." Shirone wiped sweat and glanced back, thinking, "See, I've caught up to his score already." That's when he saw Eruki behind him. The latter smirked, leisurely sat up, then walked past with hands in his pockets, saying casually, "Is it my turn now?" Shirone grew a bit anxious as everyone's eyes focused on the platform. He also looked up tensely. The result was no different than before. Eruki skillfully controlled his spiritual field, swiftly striking targets, causing them to explode simultaneously. Suddenly, a voice called out, "His spiritual field is even smaller than before." Eruki's spiritual field flashed above everyone's heads. Everyone watched in amazement. One person continued, "And even faster now." Eruki's spiritual field bent and twisted through the targets, causing them to explode continuously. Finally, Eruki raised his hand, making a gun shape toward the sky, smirking arrogantly, "Done." The board on the wall displayed, "Time's up, level 25. Score 568, time's over." Eruki paid no attention and strode away. The crowd buzzed with discussion. "Eruki's score has increased too, but it's only 1 point ahead of Shirone." The whispers grew softer. "Shirone is close, but he lost. Shirone's score is rising exponentially. He'll catch up soon." But Shirone was deeply confused. He looked at Eruki's retreating figure, thinking, a 1 point difference can't be a coincidence. The next day, their scores were just 1 point apart, 571 and 572. The day after, the numbers were 585 and 586, still just 1 point apart. Then the next day, 593 and 594, again, only 1 point difference. Eruki stood with his back to everyone, raising his right hand and glancing over his shoulder with a proud smirk. The students shouted his name in unison, "Eruki! Eruki!" Only Shirone noticed that the 1 point difference was clearly no coincidence. He stood silently among the crowd, eyes wide as he stared up at the podium, lost in thought. To surpass me by just 1 point, he must have been calculating meticulously from level 1. Shirone frowned, his gaze fixed straight ahead, quietly thinking, that's exactly it.